Good morning, my name is David Pernick and I'm an attorney at Booth Patterson in Waterford, and I'm actually a partner in the firm. We have 3 partners and I'm one of the owners. I started actually as a law clerk. I come from a family of lawyers primarily, so that's backing up even further. But I was in my last year of undergrad and I started out working in the basement of one of the skyscrapers in downtown Detroit, moving boxes around and coding them for litigation, putting numbers on them so they could be searched. It wasn't that I had plotted it out and charted it out and thought, well, I'm going to be an attorney. I was in my second year. It was law school was in an effort to further my education and give myself some additional options as far as what my career path might be. And as I looked around at my classmates and considered some of the best examples of lawyers I'd ever met were in my family, which is a really cool revelation. And I thought, yeah, I could do this. I could give this a shot. That's a little underthought, I guess. It requires certainly more contemplation than that and more diligence than that. But that was probably my first feeling, my second year in law school. Other career choices. Yeah, potentially. I mean, I thought about, I worked in a lot of restaurants as a kid and then into undergrad and even grad school. There's almost no other experience that I'm aware of that pushes you more or teaches you more to think on your feet, deal with changing situations, rapidly changing situations, deal with a ton of different types of personalities and people. You put your critical thinking skills to work while you are moving in a rapid fire situation. So I thought about cooking for a living. I thought about the possibility of being a chef or owning a restaurant. I thought about theater because I was in a theater group in high school and enjoyed it immensely. And then even when I was an undergrad, I was in community theater in a local theater organization, and got the sense, no disrespect, that I would probably enjoy it, but I might starve to death because the prospects of making it, the odds are in favor of about 1% of folks who actually make it in that profession. So. Yeah, probably food and theater were the 2 things that I would do alternatively. I think 2 things really surprised me right off the bat. One, that people were not. This is an unfortunate thing that surprised me, and this is coming from an experience where I quite literally grew up in a home with lawyers. I grew up around lawyers. I grew up around judges. I grew up around the profession, and it surprised me that unfortunately a fair amount of my colleagues and people in the profession are not very civil. Despite it being a civil practice, it's a fight. That the perspective is that this is a fight. This is wrought with conflict. You need to conquer the other side, and I've just never come from that perspective. So it was a huge, even being around, like I said, being around lawyers and law my whole life, it seemed alien to me. Why were we not in the business of resolving either current conflict or preventing conflict from occurring? I've always seen that as my role. So that was a surprise to me. On the positive side, it was a surprise to me how many people were lawyers or had that credential, and they went on to do something else because it was this bedrock for whatever other profession, because it was such a structured area of learning, such a structured way of thinking, that it does really lend itself to just about anything else. Government work, working in upper level administration, politics, really just about anything you can think of where critical thinking skills and being able to assess a situation critically from the initial onset of a situation through well, what do we do about this situation down to a conclusion and moving forward and figuring out some sort of resolution. So some of the strange things, not really strange, but endearing, I suppose, in some ways, and reminders that life takes all kinds. Our culture and our world are made up of all kinds of people. And so there are times where I would be in court and I'd be observing, or I'd be there for another matter, and folks who would stand up in front of the judge on their own without a lawyer. And I would see them do better than certain lawyers. I would see them address the problem logically, address the problem passionately, articulate. It didn't have to be, highly developed language skills or a high-end vocabulary, just someone who could, with a steady method of approaching the issue, say to the judge, this is why I think my side or my argument should prevail. And that was amazing to me, to watch an everyday citizen, after I'd been through years of school and years of practice, just get up there and knock it out of the park, in a traffic hearing. There have been some moments where I have seen, regrettably, I don't mean to take a negative tack at all, but I've seen lawyers completely crash and burn in a courtroom, and it is harrowing. It is harrowing to watch. I watched a particular lawyer who had really fallen down. Whatever was going on in his life, personal or otherwise, it really took a toll on him. And it was a packed courtroom, and it was sad. It was harrowing to see someone just come apart in a courtroom. Come apart at any point in life is hard to watch, but that was a particularly difficult. I'd always heard as a kid that the moment that you assumed you knew everything, of course you knew nothing. And so I'm always open to learning more, and not just from the legal circles. I think I might have mentioned that I'm a realtor as well, and that's only been in the last 4 or 5 years. But to be implementing all these practical skills, from the basics of putting a real estate transaction together all the way down to the closing, that informs me as a lawyer who deals in real estate law. Someone says in some particular legal transaction, well, we want to take this step, and I say, that's actually not how it works. The way that this will bear out is if you don't take this, and this step, the transaction won't go anywhere. It doesn't matter what the law says if you don't do these practical things. So that is another, just life experience, just additional experiences that inform my practice, that inform me as a professional. I'm always open to. So I think it's changed in terms of, I can tell you the reason why it has changed, and I'll tell you how it's changed. To go from being a new attorney, and really, law school, any lawyer will tell you this, law school does not prepare you to be an attorney. It doesn't. It prepares you to address legal principles, mostly, and do the thinking that's required to spot issues and to resolve things, or to try and resolve things through that assessment. It does not prepare you to be a lawyer. And so you come out of law school, and the start is the overwhelming feeling like I'm going to take some step because I don't know what I'm doing, and someone's business is going to fall off a cliff, or someone's going to go to prison, and it's going to be all my fault. Because you just don't know. You don't know how all these things come together. I'm a fairly confident person, but that was how things started in the practice. And then you get more familiar with it. You get, gratefully, you get some exposure to some terrific people, from good mentors or good colleagues, or just people who have been there before you have. And you start to feel your way. You start to be more comfortable with it. started out with a very broad practice. I was a lawyer for Big Boy. I was on their legal staff, and so I was thrilled because it had to do with food. You know, as I mentioned, I'm a big food fan. But it also was everything that goes into a business, everything that goes into an everyday, from contracts to employee issues, to food safety issues, to trademarks. I mean, all these things go into the scope of a business like that. And so, again, going from not knowing everything, you get a ton thrown at you in certain circumstances, and then you start to whittle down and get a feeling like you are gravitating towards something that you enjoy, something that it feels more comfortable for you, seems to fit as far as what type of law you'd like to practice, what type of, whether it's civil or criminal, whether it's one of the multiple subsets. And that really started to happen probably about 10 years ago, where I started to gravitate more towards probably the civil side of practice, more towards business and transactional work, but then definitely a desire to have human contact, not just paperwork, not just businesses, to know that an individual client would come in, we'd go through whatever the issue was, and then to be able to, knock on wood, have a positive impact on that person, on his or her family, and lay out some groundwork for going forward. That was an incredible change for me from those early days to start to see I was working every day and it was having an impact. It was having a positive impact. And then here we are 16 years later. And that's even more refined. There are about 5 areas on which I really focus, and those are generally civil matters as well, but a lot more of what I was hoping for, which is that one-on-one, or maybe a family dealing with me as well, much more of a person-centered practice as opposed to businesses, contracts, things that I really couldn't see except through paperwork and emails. So, even before I started school, but then when I got into school, our household was the kind of household where when the subject matter was brought up about a particular area of law, the game was on. Meaning we could talk about it at length. I could ask all the stupid questions I needed to get to the root, to try and understand some concept I just could not get, no matter how many times I pounded my head on the table in law school or in even when I was practicing. If it just wasn't coming clear to me, I had this ready resource in my own parents, in my own home, which was just extraordinary to me. To the extent it's relevant, my mom was on the Michigan Supreme Court for a number of years, and just, we miss her terribly. She and all my parents really, but she was a force to be reckoned with in the state and in the country, frankly. And then my stepdad was also a lawyer, a judge, brilliant, off the charts brilliant. Now that's really helpful, except it comes with a price as well. If you have the kind of folks that I did, you sit down at the table, you say, I don't get proximate cause. And 15 hours later, they're still not done explaining proximate cause to you. Those were my folks. So in any event, inspirational and really helpful and really supportive. I mean, they were warm and genuine and excellent at what they did. And so that, as opposed to it being an unapproachable or unreachable bit of information, it came home to me, literally. I had some good bosses. I was I told you, I was at Big Boy at their corporate offices, so the general counsel there was a terrific resource and a terrific guide for not just the law itself, but the practicalities of working in a law office. practicalities of what it takes to put a piece of paper together that poses an argument that can be considered, whether the judge agrees with you or not, or whether other people agree with you or not. At least you were learning the practices of what it meant to be a lawyer. Even the hard times. I mean, I worked for some smaller offices, and I definitely learned lessons of different personalities of bosses that just didn't mesh with mine. So even those were a help. You know, whether it be how they approach the law, how they approach their clients. Not that they were bad, they were just different from mine, and I was starting to see that. I was starting to develop that. And then, not really mentors, but I mean, I've been very fortunate to have good colleagues. I've been very fortunate to have good friends who are attorneys. And then to have good examples in my profession from office administrators in an office to legal assistants to fellow lawyers all the way up to judges and government officials at the highest level. All those things, the good examples of those and the not so good examples of those have been part of a whole atmosphere of mentoring and being able to really learn some things and employ those in my own practice. Some of the foundational things that you can do as far as practicing law is concerned, or considering this as a career. Education's a big deal. You have to have it. I mean, there's a requirement. You have to have an undergraduate degree. You have to go to law school and get your law degree, and you have to take the bar exam in order to practice law. But you don't have to practice law. You don't have to get your license. You can get those levels of learning and then some. You can get masters of laws. You can get high-end specialization in legal learning and never be a lawyer. But I would say, yeah, there's a ton of information out there generally. If you know a lawyer, if somebody you know knows a lawyer, call them up. Call him or her up. Ask. We love to talk about ourselves generally and tell war stories, and it would not be hard to find somebody if you know somebody who knows somebody. And honestly, I am available to suggest. I'm available to offer that to someone, and then also to suggest any number of people that they could talk to in the profession and say, what do you do every day? What did you have to do to get there? What's it like? What are the good days like? What are the bad days like? And then if you're interested, because it really is it's interesting for lawyers and lay people, I really am convinced of that what I mentioned earlier, which is go watch a court in session.